Hello and a very warm welcome to Greenham and Crookham Commons, the largest tract of heathland in the whole of Berkshire and one of over 80 nature reserves managed by the Berkshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire Wildlife Trust. Together, these sites provide important refuge for wildlife, places for people to come and visit and enjoy wildlife, and all of our nature reserves together are an important part of tackling the climate crisis. At 450 hectares, the Commons here are BBOWT's biggest nature reserve, and with so many different habitats, one of its most diverse too. And the Commons really do have a checkered history. Back in 1940s, this was a military airbase, and a multitude of gliders and powered aircraft took off from here on sorties for the D-Day landings. Following that, during the 70s and 80s, there was ongoing occupation by the US Air Force. During the 80s was the most controversial time on the Commons here, with the storage of US nuclear missiles in bunkers, and that sparked the women's peace movement, the most famous protest of which was in 1982 when over 35,000 people joined hands around the airbase in a movement called Embrace the Base. Following decades of military occupation, the Commons were finally returned to wildlife in the year 2000. Then in 2014, the management of the Commons transferred from West Berkshire Council to the Wildlife Trust. But history is everywhere you look still. There are over 500 different historical features dotted around the common, hidden amongst the heathland, the grassland and the ancient woodland. But it's the wildlife here that's the real showstopper, all looked after by a dedicated team of staff and volunteers. It's such a fantastic place to visit, so come on, let's go and have a look. We're starting our walk today here at the iconic Greenham Control Tower, one of three of the main car parks around the common and one of numerous entry points. When you arrive, you'll find an information board showing you what you might see and some of the routes you can take. Remember that there aren't any facilities here, so bring everything with you that you need, and of course remember to take your rubbish home with you, please. If you arrive between the 1st of March and the 31st of July, we'll have certain measures in place to protect the ground nesting birds here on site. So we ask all visitors to please keep to the main paths, and if you're unsure, look for signage explaining what to do or speak to one of our helpful wardens on site. So our walk has taken us straight out onto the common, and as you can see immediately, it's a huge wide open space. One of the things I love most about Greenham Common is just how vast it is and how you can really feel like you could lose yourself here. You're away from the busy places, the hustle and bustle. Visiting the common at this time of year is particularly fantastic with so much activity and wildlife all around you. Heathlands though are a threatened and vulnerable habitat. Since the 1700s in Berkshire, we've lost nearly 95% of the heathlands in this county, so it makes Greenham Common and places like this all that more special and important for people like the Wildlife Trust to conserve. Greenham and Crookham Commons sit within what's called the West Berkshire Living Landscape. In fact, they're really right in the heart of it. The Living Landscape is a project to look not just on our nature reserves but also at the land that surrounds them, think about buffering connectivity for wildlife across the landscape, whether that's working with other organisations or private landowners. And so the Living Landscape is a really important way to improve the resilience of wildlife within the wider countryside. We're here in a beautiful area of heathland. The sun's shining. It's a lovely day in late August, which is the perfect time to visit here when all of the heather's in flower. Right in front of me, I've got the deep pinks of the bell heather, the paler pinks of the ling heather, and the yellow of the dwarf gorse. And it's buzzing with insects. There's bees everywhere, and there's grasshoppers and crickets hopping around. And one of the specialities in areas like this is the grayling butterfly. It has these beautifully cryptic wings, so when it lands, it just folds them together, lays over on its side and just completely disappears into the undergrowth. It's absolutely stunning. Where we're standing now is the centre of the old runway on the airbase. At the time it was built, it was the longest in Europe at 2¼ miles, and all that's left now is this square patch in the middle, but it affords beautiful views off to the west and off to the east, and you can just get a feel of how expansive and large Greenham and Crookham Commons are. In the 90s, when the runway was removed, the huge amounts of concrete that were broken up actually did something really interesting to the soils here. It's changed the pH in certain areas, so where you would expect up here to be acid soils, in fact what we have are patches of alkaline soils. So the alkaline soil that's developed here has led to certain chalk-loving plants growing here. A particular one is the kidney vetch, which is the food plant of the small blue butterfly, which is a real rarity and a really nice butterfly to see here. One of the defining features of these wide open heathlands is some of the specialist birds we have there, and many of them are ground nesters. For example, we could have a nightjar nest just on the edge of the gorse here, and so you can see how vulnerable a species like that could be to disturbance or predation. So all of the management we do here is to provide suitable habitat and try and reduce that disturbance as much as we possibly can. Other key species that we find on the heath is the woodlark and the Dartford warbler. Dartford warblers don't nest right on the ground, but actually in the gorse bushes, so the banks of gorse behind me are perfect for them. They'll find themselves right in the middle of a dense gorse bush, create themselves a nest in there. And Dartford warblers, unlike many of our other warblers, are here all year round, so they're not a migratory bird. In the wintertime, these dense gorse bushes provide a safe, warm place where they can feed all year round. The common here still bears many scars of its past, and one of the most striking is the fire plane here behind me. This is a mock-up of a transporter plane which was fabricated back in the 80s. It would have been filled with mock-up seats and dummies covered in aviation fuel and set fire to, and then the fire crews here would train how to extinguish a fire on an aeroplane. As you can see now, it's starting to soften, the brambles and scrub are growing up around it, and nature's reclaiming the land. The common isn't all free draining and dry gravel soils. In fact, there are over 70 ponds and wet features across the site. And here is one of my favourites. This is what we call the newt pond, and we've recorded all 3 species of newt here, great crested, smooth and palmate newts, so we know that it's a really biodiverse and important pond. With the sun shining, there are loads of dragonflies about here, and across the commons we've recorded over 20 species of dragonflies, so it's a really important site for them. One of the seasonal highlights here at Greenham is the autumn ladies' tresses. These delicate little flowers with these tightly clustered white flowers spiralling up the stem really look very unique, and we're very lucky here at Greenham to have such a healthy population. Some years we can have thousands across the grassland, and Greenham is particularly special for this flower because it's one of the biggest populations in the whole of the south of England. So we're almost at the end of our walk back at the control tower now. They have a cafe there which does very good cake, comes highly recommended. What I like so much about Greenham Common is just how much the site changes through the year. It's a beautiful place to come and visit, so I hope we'll see you here soon.